In this video, I'm going to cover logic statements inside of the C# language. Generally speaking, there are three specific types of logic statements: if statements, if-else, and switch. These logic statements should be pretty familiar to you if you've ever programmed before. They're pretty common logic statements that exist in just about any programming language. If you're familiar with any C-based languages, including C, C#, Java, JavaScript, C#, you should be very familiar with what's involved in building most of these logic statements. We'll start out with the most simplistic if statement. If statements start out with if, parentheses, and then it's some sort of a logical statement that can be evaluated to a Boolean. And the Booleans either are true or false. So inside of the if statement, you can say something like, Kevin equals Kevin. And if that evaluates to true, then we can say textbox1.text equals true. Your name is Kevin. Running this will give us true. Your name is Kevin in the text box. Now that's a little overly simplified. We could also just put the true Boolean in here. We could run it again and we'll get the same statement. We can also do bool is true, and then we can say is true equals false, and then we can say is true if is true, add the statement. So because is true equals false, this will not evaluate, and it will actually skip the line 29, true, your name is Kevin. We set is true to true and run, then we'll get true, your name is Kevin. We can also capture input from a user. So if we go and move our text box down, we'll add another input box here and a button. And then we'll add a small label that asks for name. And then on this button click, we'll actually do our evaluation. So we can grab our if statement and we'll move them down into the button event handler. And then in here we can say, we'll rename this text box to txtName. You can say if txtName.text equals Kevin, then for it to output true, your name is Kevin. So we'll compile and run. We'll type Kevin, and we'll click the button. It says true, your name is Kevin. If we say Steve, and we click the button, we have no logic to handle your name being Steve. It's simply an if statement. So there's no way to clear that box. So we can loop back and we can say textbox1.text equals an empty string. So that'll be our reset. And then we'll type in Kevin, true. We type in Steve, then we get no response. So that's an if statement. If else is the same construct as if, but we add to it additional else cases. So we basically have two cases. So we can say if txtName.text equals Kevin, textbox1.text equals true, your name is Kevin, else textbox1.text equals false, try again. So if this evaluates to true, this line or block of code will run. Else, if it does not evaluate to true, then this block of code will run. So we'll do an F5. We'll say Kevin. We still get true. We'll say Steve. It says false, try again. Now this evaluation of true or false, txtName.text equals Kevin, does not have to happen in the if statement. We can still use our variable of isTrue, and we can say isTrue equals this logic statement. And by doing that evaluation first, this will get evaluated. Whatever the outcome of that is, whether that's true or false, actually gets stored in the isTrue variable. And then we can say if isTrue, do this block, else do this block. So again, if we do Kevin versus Steve, is a nice way to do some additional math or logic work. We can also nest these statements together. So we can do if else, or we can say if else, and we can say else if txtName.text equals Steve. And then this block will get evaluated if the name equals Steve. So true, your name is Kevin. Okay, your name is Steve. And false, try again. So it works its way down through this hierarchy of if-else. In reality, what this if-else statement is it's this statement where you have these nested ifs, but you aren't required for one line. You're not required to put the curly brackets. So you could really consider this to be this statement. And then just for readability, people often will do if-else like this, and then just have everything kind of line up and cascade. Now you notice there's a space between the else and the if. That is important because this is truly two different statements. Additionally, I want to mention that to do logical comparisons, you need to use the double equal sign. If you do a single equals, that is an assignment, and that does not compute into a Boolean response of true or false. So you need to use your double equals. So the final type of check, and the reason this one exists is because you can end up with these large cascades, is a switch statement. Now a switch statement allows you to take input and then compare it to different cases. You start off by saying switch, and then in parentheses you take the value that you're wanting to test. In this case for us it will be txtName.text. So we're taking the text from that text box and we're setting up a series of cases that we're wanting to evaluate. So our first case will be the string Kevin. And then after that we'll want to do work. And the last thing we want to do is we want to break from this case statement or the switch statement. Our second case will be Steve. And we'll do work here. And then we'll break again. Case Bill. We'll do work, and then we'll break. If you do not include the breaks, you can alternatively include a return statement, but the return and the break essentially do the same thing. They do not allow cascades between these case statements. So if Kevin, then we'll say textbox1.text equals true. Your name is Kevin. We'll steal this line here for Steve. We will add a line for Bill. And then we can add a kind of an else type statement, which is default. And we'll have that say false, try again. with a break. So if we run and we type Kevin, it says true. If we type Bill, it's false. Try again. And the reason it's false is that this switch statement is case sensitive. It is looking for a lowercase bill, when in fact txtname.text is passing Bill with a capital B. So I'll show you in a moment how to correct that. So if we do Bill lowercase, it'll say hello Bill. If we do Steve lowercase, it'll say okay, your name is Steve. And if we say Patty, for example, it'll say false. Try again. So how do we handle the uppercase, lowercase? Well, we can't do logical checks inside of the case. So instead what we can do is we can call toLower, and this will cause all of our strings to be lowercase. So now whether we put Bill, or Bill, or Bill, we always end up with the correct response. So doing that string manipulation using the toLower method on our string of text from the text box allows us to have these cases validate correctly every time. Now keep in mind that you don't always want to call toLower. If you put it in there every time, then you run the risk of maybe getting false positives in certain cases. So depending on your scenario and how you would want to use it, you could use the toLower to help alleviate false negatives on your switch statements. So we have ifs, if else, and switch as our three ways of validating logic in our application.